All right, welcome everyone to tonight's meeting of the Clyde Sukeforth chapter of SABR. I am Bruce McClure, the chapter chair, and we always hold our meetings in conjunction with the Gardner-Waterman chapter of SABR in Vermont, Dr. Clayton Truder, chair. Now, before we get started, let's go to Jeff Cohen. Jeff, tell me what's going on with your podcast. Uh-oh. Did Jeff, you there, my friend?
Here we go. I'm muted. I had to unmute. You hear me?
There you go. Yep, we're good.
All right. So, yes, this week on the podcast on Baseball and BBQ, we have the one and only Donna Muscarella of the Elysian Fields chapter of SABR, the president. And it was a fascinating conversation. Everybody should tune in to Baseball and BBQ on all your podcast apps.
If your podcatcher is not set to grab Baseball and BBQ, set it to grab that podcast. It's one of the best out there. You're going to be entertained, and it's a good one. Thanks for that, Jeff. I appreciate you. All right, SABR member and president of the New York Giants Preservation Society, Gary Mintz, has championed the restoration of two historical markers honoring the Polo Grounds Towers, and the Great Willie Mays. With the invaluable assistance of Willie's son, Michael, the bureaucratic red tape has been cleared and funding has been secured to restore these two markers to their former condition. If you have experience restoring historic markers or have any suggested companies or artisans who have the skills to do this work, please reach out to Gary at giantsguru@gmail.com to discuss that at your earliest opportunity. All right. Let's go on with our feature presentation. This one's going to be a good one. While the integration of the Texas League and more broadly organized baseball in Texas share many parallels with the Jackie Robinson story, one major difference is that the various barrier breakers of the Lone Star State remain largely unrecognized, unsung, and even unknown. This presentation begins with the historic but short-lived integration of the Lamesa Lobos Class C West Texas New Mexico League in 1951, progresses through the gradual but incomplete integration of the Texas League from 1952 to 1955, and closes with the demise and exit of the league's last all-white holdout, the Shreveport Sports, in 1957. Along the way, the story will recognize not only the achievement of the black players involved, but also the obstacles they faced, ranging from discrimination to legislation and even death threats. SABR member Jason Schwartz is a member of the Email Roth Chicago chapter and co-chair of the SABR Baseball Cards Research Committee. His collection of Henry Aaron baseball cards and memorabilia is currently on display at the Atlanta History Center, and his baseball card-inspired artwork can be found at the Honus Wagner Museum and PNC Park. And he's here tonight to give us what he tells me is his deluxe version of the award-winning SABR 53 presentation, The Savior Does Not Answer Letters, Dave Hoskins and the Uneven, Unheralded, and Unfinished Integration of the Texas League, Jason Schwartz. Welcome to Northern New England, my dude. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Bruce, that's quite an introduction. I'll see if I can live up to it. Let me make sure I can share my screen as well. Otherwise,
you should be aces, man, because you're a co-host, so you're set.
The oral history. There you go. You can see the screen, I'm guessing?
Yes, it's all yours.
Beautiful. So first off, besides thanking Bruce and thanking the Sukeforth chapter, I want to say thank you to everybody here. If you caught me in Dallas, I have either good news or bad news. I'm going to be giving a similar presentation, but it's longer. I don't know if that's good or bad news for you, but the point is I've stuffed in some extra facts, trivia, extra for experts, call it what you will, and I won't have to talk as fast as I did in Dallas with the 20-minute timer. If you didn't catch me in Dallas, my goal is just that you learn about some players that maybe you never heard of before, or maybe you knew the name, but you didn't realize, oh, they did this and this too. So that's about it, right? Just kind of keeping with the whole SABR spirit, really just education on something I found really interesting, and I hope you do too. So with that, I'm just going to jump right in. This is The Savior Does Not Answer Letters, Dave Hoskins and the Uneven, Unheralded, and Unfinished Integration of the Texas League. Now, there might be some of you that hear that title and you think of John Updike or Ted Williams, especially I see some Boston friends in the audience, but I got to tell you, I'm less of a books guy. I'm more of a baseball card guy. So I'm actually referring in my title to the back of the 1954 Topps Dave Hoskins baseball card that I'll show you soon. So in keeping with the story of the integration of the Texas League, I'm going to give you a crash course in Texas League history. Now, pardon me, I kept all my Texas jokes from the presentation in Dallas, so you're all going to get them. So the main thing you need to know about the Texas League, your SABR members, your researchers, you can look it up. It's on the internet. It's in books. I'm giving you this crash course. All I need you to know is that it goes back a long way, or as we would say in Texas, it's old as dirt. So how old? Well, it dates back to 1888, which was so long ago that on the left, this is what baseball cards looked like in 1888. I know Hoyle's probably got 3 of these in his collection, but at any rate, not only is this what baseball cards looked like, this is what baseball players looked like in 1888, right? Maybe world-class athletes back then, right? But certainly nobody you'd confuse with Shohei Ohtani, for example, in terms of physique. By the way, if you've got good eyes, that final card I'm showing you there, that's what mascots looked like in 1888. They were actually human beings, usually kids. Now, if you don't know your Texas geography, I'll just let you know the 6 charter franchises were in these 6 cities. 4 of them would stick around for quite a while, but in general, there was a lot of flux and churn in the league. Almost every year, a franchise would move, go out of business, be replaced, etc. So if you looked at, let's say, the Texas League of 1910 and the Texas League of 1920, they wouldn't necessarily have a lot of teams in common. But at any rate, there you go. I will say later in the 1888 season, New Orleans joined the league. So not a charter franchise, but still from 1888. And so one of the things to know about the Texas League, you'll see this later, it isn't 100% confined to Texas. Now we're going to fast forward quite a bit, right? I could give you the year by year, but I won't do that. Since the focus here is on integration, I'm going to fast forward all the way, not to 1947, even though the card might lead you to think that, but to 1946 and the integration of minor league baseball. So in this case, that would still be Jackie Robinson, but now it's the Montreal Royals rather than the Brooklyn Dodgers. Now, the nice thing about this period, 46, 47, if you like, is if you look in the lower right, giving you a range of years, basically 1938 to 1955, minus the war years when the Texas League didn't operate at all. And the configuration of cities stayed perfectly stable. That's not something you'd find in any other 15-year stretch of the Texas League. So it's actually kind of cool because the good news is from the integration of minor league baseball in 46 to the end of integration of the Texas League in 55, I can just talk about the same 8 cities over and over. I don't have to worry about a new one popping up or one of them disappearing. Well, maybe one, but we'll get to that. So this is the state of the Texas League at that time. Now, with these, sorry, let me add these little markers for you. Now, we are actually going to head west of these 8 cities for just a brief detour to Lamesa, Texas, because even though the integration of the Texas League doesn't truly begin in Lamesa, Texas, it's a chance to learn something new, and one could at least wonder whether there was any indirect influence between what was happening in Lamesa and what would soon happen in Dallas and these other cities. So the gentleman in the middle wearing the cap with the white bill, that is Jay Haney. He was the manager of the Lamesa Lobos. That was a team in the West Texas, New Mexico League near the New Mexico border. So I don't know if we have any fans, but shout out Lamesa Lobos, right? Been there, done that, got the t-shirt. Anyways, Jay Haney had served in World War II. What he saw there was that the integration of the U.S. military didn't lead to complete ruin and disaster, right? And so by the beginning of the 1951 calendar year, January, he thought to himself, why not my baseball team? So he held a tryout. There were 20 players that attended, and out of those 20, there were 2 that he deemed good enough to invite to training camp. And pretty remarkably, I think there are actually photos of these 2 players. And so that's who you see on the card. On the left, it's a pitcher named Connie Hurd. On the right, it's a shortstop named J.W. Wingate. And then right in the middle is manager Jay Haney. So the story has a few twists and turns, which is this. These 2 players both received invitation to camp. There's a research challenge for somebody out there. They sort of disappear for a couple of weeks. And in fact, a couple of weeks later, they seem to have no affiliation with the team. So it feels like, well, what happened to these guys? So much for the integration of Lamesa Lobos. But I would say, weirdly enough, it really just means I didn't research deeply enough to figure out what happened. So I'll say, to my surprise, J.W. Wingate was in fact on the roster for opening day. Not only that, he was joined by two Black Cuban players. There was a catcher, Douglas McBean, and a pitcher, Roberto Leyva. Now, there's kind of a funny story. Since this is the extended version, you'll get it. Dallas didn't. Kind of a funny story is Jay Haney, when he thought about integrating his team, was actually hoping for Black Cuban players. And I think this had to do with what he assumed the public reaction to integration would be, that the public would be more receptive to Black Cuban players than Black American players. So I mentioned, besides J.W. Wingate on opening day, he had two other Black players, both Cuban, on the roster. Well, first, let me talk about opening day, and then we'll see sort of an example of careful what you wish for, perhaps. But at any rate, on opening day, Wingate and McBean, the catcher, both made it into the lineup as pinch hitters. And so on that day, they integrated the Lamesa Lobos, which to you might not sound like a big deal, but it also means they integrated the West Tex New Mex League. And that may not sound like a big deal, but they integrated professional baseball in the state of Texas and integrated professional baseball in the entire American South. Now, let's not get carried away. Obviously, integrating this one team on opening day didn't lead to a mass wave of integration and equality across the American South, but they were the first, right? Lasting impact, debatable, but this was a first in the American South, first team to integrate. So I mentioned a little bit of careful what you wish for. Well, here was Jay Haney. He really wanted those Black Cuban players over Black American players. Well, within a week of the start of the season, when he figured out that they didn't understand his directions in English, he got frustrated and kicked both of them off the team. Even J.W. Wingate was gone 6 weeks into the season, despite being, I would say, a better than average shortstop for the league. One of the themes in this integration story, but probably in a lot of integration stories, is being good enough isn't really good enough, right? And so being a slightly above average shortstop in the league wasn't enough for J.W. Wingate to survive the entire season with the team. He was gone in about 6 weeks. So the question you might ask, I certainly did, and I can't say directly that I found the answer, is whether this 1951 season in La Mesa had any ripple effect across these 8 cities of the Texas League. And in general, I think the correct answer would be no. The proof being that none of these 8 teams integrated in 1951. But here's the thing, while there wasn't consensus towards integration, we know in Texas we can always find somebody willing to go against the grain, or what we might call a Dallas Maverick. And that's exactly what we had. Sorry, Luka Doncic fans, it is not him, but Dick Burnett. So Dick Burnett was indeed a Dallas Maverick. He purchased the Dallas Eagles in 1948 and definitely had a Maverick reputation as an oil man, but as it turned out, also as a baseball owner. In fact, just a couple years into owning the team, decided that it was time to set the Texas League record for attendance. And how did he do this? Well, he did 2 things. The first thing he did was he rented out the Cotton Bowl, right? Now, a baseball game hadn't been played in the Cotton Bowl before, but it did hold 100,000 fans versus Burnett Field, which was a little more like, we'll say 10,000 or fewer. So that was kind of a Maverick thing to do, renting out the Cotton Bowl. But guess who took the field for the Dallas Eagles to start the game? Well, a cast of all-time all-stars, if you're good recognizing old-timey baseball players. From the left, that's pitcher Dizzy Dean, catcher Mickey Cochran. If you know your baseball history, these guys are not in their prime at all, right? So it was basically an old-timers lineup. Dean, in fact, pitched to the first batter of the game on the other team. It wasn't old-timers versus old-timers. It was actually old-timers versus the other team. Dizzy Dean apparently walked the leadoff man on 4 pitches, at which point Burnett called all 9 of these men back into the dugout and had his regular lineup sub. So you won't find it in Baseball Reference, but I would argue that every one of these guys had a minor league appearance in 1950. Well, anyways, we don't need to dig into that, although the SABR game story would be cool if somebody wanted to write it. I will say this, that it certainly shows his Maverick character. Well, late January 1952, Burnett let it be known that he planned to integrate the Dallas Eagles. And so that was an even more maverick thing at that time. How did it go? Well, he held a tryout. These aren't the actual players, but he held a tryout in mid-February. And depending which reports you read, had up to 200 black players attend. According to some reports, as few as 150. But the point is, a lot of players. And I'll let you think about, we don't worry about the chat or anything like that till the end, but I'll just let you think about, out of these 150 to 200 players, how many the Eagles brass thought were good enough to play AA baseball in Texas. And then I'll tell you the answer. So, out of 150 to 200 players who tried out, including 50 who made it to the final round and played kind of some intra-squad games on the third day of the tryout, the total number that the Eagles determined were good enough to play AA baseball was 0. So there are a couple explanations for that, and I'm going to say maybe both are true at once. So first off, Burnett didn't open the tryout up to just anybody. In fact, if you were already affiliated with a team, including a Negro League team, you were a little bit off limits, right? How would he know? Would he check? I don't know. But the point is, it was essentially for black players who were free agents, not already under contract, number one. But then number two, again, that theme, right? Being good enough isn't quite good enough, right? So could some of these guys have played on the Eagles potentially, but could they have been good enough that the public would have accepted integration? Hard to say. So after Burnett goes 0 for 200, right? Had this just been performative, we might say he was all hat, no cowboy, I think is how the saying goes. But good for him, he didn't give up. He actually signed two guys that I don't think were free agents, actually, two former Negro League All-Stars. One was Othello Renfro, the other was Ray Neal. Now, Renfro didn't make it to camp. I learned, in fact, I wondered, why didn't he come to camp? Well, Alan Cohen in the National Pastime Journal actually explained it to me that Othello Renfro, in fact, was under contract with another team, and because of his prior obligations, wasn't able to report to camp in Daytona. Ray Neal did report to camp, but the Eagles were like, actually, he's not as good as we thought he was, and so they didn't want him. So Burnett now, right, he was 0 for 200. Now he's 0 for 202, including two of the guys were ringers. So he did the one thing you do sometimes when you get stuck, which is he phoned a friend. And in his case, the friend was the former 1932 Texas League Most Valuable Player, Hank Greenberg, who was now, in a way, not exactly, but in a way, Dick Burnett's boss, sort of. Greenberg was the GM of the Cleveland Indians. The Dallas Eagles were the AA affiliate, right? And so Burnett knew, right, that Greenberg was with the Indians. It was a team with tremendous black talent. It was the first to integrate in the American League. And the black talent wasn't just on the major league roster, but it extended throughout much of the minor league system, just not Dallas. Well, Greenberg thought about it, thought about his experiences, on that front. And he said, it isn't enough for me to find you somebody that can just barely make the team. What you need is a stellar player, right? And I might have just one of those. And so in Texas, we would say Hank Greenberg found him a lone star. So that lone star was Dave Hoskins. He actually had a gaudy Negro Leagues resume before ever setting foot in Dallas. But I want to emphasize this point. Even in SABR circles, most people don't know this guy's name. Well, you will. Well, you do right now. But by the end of this talk, you'll not only know it, I hope you'll remember it. Not a household name, even in SABR circles, and certainly not to the casual baseball fan. But look how good he is. First off, member of the Homestead Grays dynasty, 1944 to 1946, 2 pennants, 1 world title, world championship, and not just a guy sitting in the dugout. Take a look here as he lights up. He was, in fact, he's right next to Josh Gibson and Buck Leonard, a member of the Homestead Grays fabled Murderers Row, right? Think of him like the Tony Lazzeri of the Homestead Grays, if you like. So, total stud. Now, here's the thing, because I know some of you are going to do this. You can go look up his Homestead Grays stats on Baseball Reference. You can go check out Seam Heads if you like, right? And you might not be that impressed, but we know, right, that there's always more to it than just the numbers. And so let me give you some more evidence. I know, by the way, I have a Wendell Smith expert on this call at the moment, so he may need to fact check me if I get something wrong here. But when Wendell Smith in 1945 identified the three players that he thought had the best shot of integrating Major League Baseball so he could bring them to a tryout with the Boston Red Sox and later the Boston Braves, Dave Hoskins was one of the three. And the other two, these are names you recognize, these are two future National League Rookies of the Year. One of them did some other big impressive things too. I've understated his quals there, but the other one's Jackie Robinson. So come on. Okay, so how highly did the Grays regard Dave Hoskins? Well, so highly, they wouldn't let him go to the tryout. They were like, hey, I get it. I get it. Wendell Smith thinks you might be able to integrate Major League Baseball, but we actually want to keep you here. So he was replaced by a guy you should look up if you don't know the name, Marvin Williams. I think his lifetime average in Baseball Reference is like 380 something. It's just absolutely insane. Okay, but I digress. So Dave Hoskins, highly regarded enough to be chosen as one of Wendell Smith's three, but unable to attend. As it turned out, you know the story, it was a sham tryout anyways, so it didn't really matter. Nonetheless, 3 years later, Dave Hoskins finds himself in the world of white baseball. He becomes the first black player in the history of something called the Central League, mostly a bunch of teams around Michigan. He integrated the Grand Rapids Jets along with the entire league. He was still mostly a hitter at this point, and interestingly enough, he did not come directly from the Grays or even any Negro League team. He came from the softball fields of Flint, Michigan, to join the Grand Rapids Jets and bat nearly 400. An incredible season, but as you can imagine, integrating even the Central League up in Michigan has its job hazards, and so he was the frequent target of beanballs and from a hospital bed. As he told the story to, I think, Mudcat Grant, and Mudcat recounts it in his book, something like that. Dave Hoskins from the hospital bed decided it was probably safer for him as a black baseball player to be the one doing the throwing, right? And decided to convert himself to pitcher. Well, he had an excellent tutor, probably the best that anybody could have ever asked for. In following the 1949 minor league season, he toured with the Satchel Paige All-Stars. He didn't follow them all over the place, but some of the more local venues played with Satchel Paige, and Paige did two things for him. One, he helped Dave Hoskins perfect his curveball. Hoskins was a tremendous curveball pitcher, or became one, and you're going to actually see that, so don't take my word for it. I'm going to show it to you. But he also did something else. Satch had a relationship with Hank Greenberg, and he called Hank Greenberg and said, hey, this is a guy that Cleveland should take a look at. And so with that, right, with the recommendation of no less than Satchel Paige, Hoskins found himself in the Cleveland system. 1951, with the Wilkes-Barre Indians, that's the single A affiliate, one step below Dallas. Dave made his pitching a little more official. He went 5-1 on the mound while still batting 286, right? So as he was learning to pitch, he didn't forget how to hit. So this is the makings of a two-way star, and this is who arrived then in Dallas in April of 1952. Now, I'm glad I've got Hoyle here, because who do you think Dave's first opponent was? You might picture a minor league team or a Texas League team or whatnot. His very first opponent was none other than the Boston Red Sox. This is Dave Hoskins warming up before the game, and you will soon see him pitching to the actual 1952 Boston Red Sox. The only thing that's kind of a bummer is Ted Williams, who is finishing up some military obligations, didn't make it to Texas till the next day to play against Fort Worth. So there was no Ted Williams, but there's that curveball I promised you. So pretty amazing. Now, regular season gets started 10 days later. By the way, how did Hoskins do against the Red Sox? I should tell you. He went 4 innings, gave up only 1 run on 2 hits. Not bad at all. All righty. Regular season gets going. If the Texas League had a Jackie Robinson Day, I suppose we'd call it Dave Hoskins Day, and it was April 13th, 1952. This was his official debut. The Eagles hosted Tulsa, and you can see the stats here, and I'm going to get to go a little slower than I had to in Dallas, so I get to enjoy these and savor them. So, complete game, gave up 2 hits, but let's also look and see how he did at the plate. He went 2 for 4. I'll talk about attendance when we get to the end. Next game out, pitches even better. Look at that. Pitches a shutout, gives up only 4 hits. And at the plate, that's not a typo. He went 4 for 4. Holy cow. All right. Next game, 9 innings again. Gives up 2 runs. Don't worry, I only have 7 of these. You might be like, oh, God, how many of these games does this guy have? No, I have them all, but I'm only showing you 7. Anyway, okay. Gives up 2 runs. Let's take a look at the plate. Goes 2 for 5. Look at that attendance, 11,000. We'll be back to that in a second. After that, he actually has possibly his worst game of the entire season. He goes to Beaumont, Texas, gives up 5 runs and goes 0 for 4, ends his hitting streak. But adding insult to injury, how did the Dallas Eagles lose that game? Well, unfortunately, it was on a throwing error with 2 outs in the 9th by Dave Hoskins himself. So probably his worst game of the season, but bounces back, gives up 2 runs, collects 2 hits, then goes 12 innings, gives up 3 runs, still loses 1 for 4 at the plate. And then I'll just show you one more of these. So here he is, 9 innings, gives up a run, collects a hit. After 7 games, and there's a reason I'm stopping May 16th, right? After 7 games, he's 5-2. So you picture that among the league leaders for sure, right? You can clearly see we're talking about one of the best pitchers in the league already. His ERA, 2.06. His batting average is 444. So that's unreal. It's not going to stay 444 all season, but that's quite a start. Now let's talk about attendance. As you look at that number, he averaged 6,500 fans a game for these 7 starts. And you might think, what's going on? Were there fans boycotting? Why was attendance so low? But here's what you maybe don't know. Post-war attendance in the Texas League averaged 2,000 fans a game. So this 6,500 number, it is not low. This is triple the average Texas League attendance. He has literally tripled attendance. So what am I saying here? He was a stud on the mound, he was a stud at the plate, and he was a stud at the gate. All right? Pretty incredible. Now, the crazy thing, he didn't hang on to that 444 batting average, but everything else you see here, he pretty much managed to do the entire season. But I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. What I will say is this. Dick Burnett had seen enough. I hate to use the word experiment or social experiment when we're talking about people. For me, it's just, I know it gets used. It's not my style. I will say this, though. If we call it any kind of experiment, Dick Burnett figured out that it was a huge success. And so what do you do in Texas? You double down, and that's exactly what he did. So there was a pitcher named Jose Santiago who was also out of the Cleveland system. 1951, he was the ace of the Wilkes-Barre Indians. He was Dave Hoskins' teammate, and he was the ace pitcher. He's, by the way, Puerto Rican legend, nicknamed Pantalones, if you ever want to look him up. Total stud. Anyways, he had left, I think maybe a week before, he had left the Indian system because he was frustrated that he wasn't going anywhere and was ready to head back to Puerto Rico or maybe look for a black team to sign on with. And Dick Burnett gave him a call. He agreed. You can see here a photo of his historic signing. First Afro-Latino player, we could say, in the history of the Texas League, or we could call him the Larry Doby of the Texas League if you prefer. But at any rate, and for the card collectors, also has a baseball card in the 1956 set. I will say, because Hoyle's on, not to be confused with Red Sox pitcher Jose Santiago from a decade later. At any rate, there we go. So Burnett added Santiago. Santiago had a great season for the Eagles as well. Now, here's the thing, though, for Hoskins, for the Eagles, it was not entirely happy trails. I've shared a lot of success so far, but this is the Jim Crow South, right? Think about where Hoskins stayed on the road. Well, not in the same hotel as his teammates. Where was he able to eat on the road? Well, possibly in a bus, right? So not all happy trails, but this was particularly true when the team traveled to Shreveport, Louisiana. So let's go there. It's Gene Autry who sings deep in the heart of Texas that the chicken hawks are full of squawks, and I don't even know what that means, but I thought full of squawks was a good way to describe a particular fan of the Shreveport Sports that was in attendance one June 9th. So here's that baseball card I promised you. And if we read the cartoon, it tells us when Dave was with Dallas on June 9th, he got 2 letters threatening his life. Now, Dave told us later it was 3. He got 1 death threat if he showed up at all. He got another death threat if he was seen on the field, and he got another death threat if he took the mound. So 3 death threats if he pitched that day. But remember the title, the Savior doesn't answer letters. He let his pitching do the talking. And so what do we see? He wouldn't be frightened. This is right off the baseball card. He hurled the game and won. Yep, he did. And that year chalked up a whole bunch of wins, but I blacked it out to keep you in suspense. I hope that's okay. I'm going to tell you the answer soon. He won a lot of games. All righty. So with that, let's return now to Hoskins and head toward, or actually, hold on. Before we do that, a little rusty, I guess. It's been a while since Dallas. Before I do that, let's say this. How were the other teams feeling about integration by now? The first thing to know, and I give you exact quotes in my National Pastime article, but the first thing to know is of the 8 teams in the league, you had Dallas, of course, 6 other teams, if I had to summarize their response to Dallas and Dick Burnett's plans to integrate, they were all pretty similar to one another. They were like, yeah, that might be something we look at eventually, right? In other words, they weren't dyed-in-the-wool opposed to it, but they certainly weren't going to take the lead either, right? I think it was a little bit, let's wait and see how it goes in Dallas. All right. There was some nuance, and you'll see that in the article. But for the most part, 6 teams out of the other 7 were somewhat lukewarm to integration, but at least a little bit open to it. The exception, no surprise, was Shreveport, where they said pretty much, we're going to integrate over our dead bodies, which, by the way, proved to come true, not quite literally, but about as close as could be literal for a sports franchise. So if we were to characterize the approach, I suppose, to future integration with these other teams, I would say sooner or later, right? Maybe that's how they were thinking about it. And so if you had to think sooner, this is a big stretch for my dad jokes, but if you have to think sooner, of course, we're talking Oklahoma. So Oklahoma City, next to integrate, late July, they signed Bill Greason. Now, where was Bill Greason at the time? You might know him from the Birmingham Black Barons. You might know him from the 2024 Rickwood Classic. But at any rate, Bill Greason was wrapping up a military stint at Camp Lejeune. And as soon as he finished, the Oklahoma City Indians signed him up. So Camp Lejeune, Bill Greason, by the way, Reverend Bill Greason, still alive and well today in Birmingham at 100 years old, which means he is eligible for a settlement. Now, in only his second start, he faced off against Dave Hoskins, and that was the first all-black pitching matchup in Texas League history. And Alan Cohen, who knows a lot about this subject, more than me as far as, I would say, integration of minor league baseball. Alan let me know that, in fact, that was the first all-black pitching matchup in what was then known as white organized baseball. So what about the major leagues? Normally, we think of the integration of the Texas League 5 years after Jackie, right, as running behind. But in fact, the first all-black pitching matchup in what was then thought of by many audiences as Major League Baseball was not until the following year, 1953. Maybe you won't be surprised to know that Dave Hoskins was one of the combatants on the Indians, and the other was Mark's friend, Satchel Paige, for the St. Louis Browns. So that was, I think, something like August 1953. I'd have to look it up, but basically a year after the Texas League matchup. All right. With that, let's return to Hoskins, or as we like to say, meanwhile, back at the ranch. I'm going to fast forward now to the end of August, August 28th, if you will. And this is Dave Hoskins night. This was literally like 3 days before the SABR convention. I found this video that I would have never believed existed. So here's Dave Hoskins. He's getting a trophy. He's getting gifts. The gentleman on the left that you saw, he disappeared. He was the head of the Dallas NAACP, and he was the master of ceremonies. But I'll tell you a couple things that are pretty incredible about that Dave Hoskins night. It was not in Dallas. It was in Fort Worth. The arch rival Fort Worth Cats held a Dave Hoskins night in his honor. That's how incredible he was in 1952. I mean, that's like unheard of, right? I remember when I was in high school or something, and Kareem was on his retirement tour, and like the Celtics had a little thing to honor Kareem, and they brought out a rocking chair, but that's Kareem, and that's after like a legendary career. This is Dave Hoskins, his first year in the league, and the arch enemy Fort Worth Cats are honoring him. But let's give you a sign of the times. The MC, right, from the Dallas NAACP, gives a wonderful speech. Talks about Hoskins, the example that Hoskins set to show, right, that white players and black players can play just fine together, work just fine together, right? And it is raucous applause throughout the ballpark in the white seating section and in the black seating section. By the way, Hoskins integrated the league. He didn't integrate the seating sections, even in Dallas, right? That would come, but not yet. So the MC figures out he's on a roll. And he said, you know what? With the success Hoskins had, maybe someday even in Shreveport, they might integrate. And this might surprise you, but it was raucous applause throughout the ballpark once again. But now get ready. I'm setting you up for this, right? Well, when then, on a roll, he said, and even right here in Fort Worth, the white seating section booed so loud that he couldn't even finish his sentence. Dave Hoskins had to come grab the mic and restore order in the ballpark. The MC literally got booed off the stage. So the ultimate not in my backyard, right? Now, let's talk about the on the field action. Hoskins shows up at this Dave Hoskins night with 19 wins, right? Well, sometimes life is storybook. He pitched a 3-hit shutout and finished the game as the league's first 20-game winner. Pretty cool on the night held in your honor. You might wonder, somebody should write a SABR game story on that. And guess what? Good news. I got you covered. There is one. But what else did he do? Remember, he could hit. He went 2 for 4. And at the end of the night, this took some work on my part, but trust me, it's actually true. He finished the night with the highest batting average in the league. Imagine that, right? The league's only 20-game winner and the league's highest batting average. Incredible, right? Plus about 10,000 fans came to this game. Now, Dallas, not to be outdone, did hold their own Dave Hoskins night. About a week later, Hoskins didn't quite oblige the hometown fans as much. He got cool gifts. You can see some golf clubs. He got a lot of cash, by the way. I think he got more cash at Dave Hoskins night in Dallas than he made all season with the team. I don't know if I mentioned this. He was the lowest paid player on the team, despite being the best pitcher in the league, one of the best hitters in the league, and by far the biggest draw. So pretty cool, other than the pay part. We would love to see the pay go up. But yeah, he got some cash and golf clubs and some other gifts in Dallas. Now, in order for him to oblige the fans by pitching on Dave Hoskins night, he pitched on something like 2 days rest and got shelled. So not quite storybook there. But at any rate, let's see. Yes, this one, open invitation, because I haven't signed up and I kind of have other things happening. So this one does need a SABR game story if anybody wants to take that on. I'm going to highlight some other research opportunities as we go. All right, let's see how the year finished up. All right, well, I said a stud on the mound. Led the league in wins. By the way, this 22, that doesn't include his 2 postseason wins. He was 2-0 in the postseason. Of the top 5 in wins, including his own teammate, highest winning percentage, lowest ERA. Clearly the best pitcher in the league, which is why he finished second in the Pitcher of the Year voting. There's a story there. I won't quite go into it. You might imagine one of the reasons, and I will too. I'll also say that for some bizarre reason in the Texas League, they voted about a month before the season ended, and Hoskins went on an absolute tear for the final month. And the gentleman that won Pitcher of the Year, Hal Erickson, had a really dismal final month of the season. So I think that had some impact as well. I mentioned Greason and Santiago. I'll just show you. They were clearly top 10 pitchers in the league. So if we look at the 3 black players in the Texas League in 1952, because this was it. That was it for integration in 1952. Just absolutely amazing. 55 wins against only 18 losses. I found their composite ERA, it was something like 2.4, right? Hard to do much better than these guys did. So there you go. And with that, let's look at hitting. He didn't hang on to that 444 average I showed you before, but he did finish the year at 328. He was only 5 points from the top batting average in the league. Not enough at bats, so obviously unofficial, but you still get a pretty good idea that his skills with the bat were pretty strong. And I promise you, Grant Dunlap in Shreveport was not a power hitter, in case you're wondering, was this like Arias, finishing a little below Aaron Judge? No power hitters on this whole list as far as I know. All right, now, you don't get to be the savior of the Texas League just by pitching and hitting well, right? Anybody can do that. No, not really. But that doesn't make you the savior. The savior, it is all about the cash you're bringing to the table. And so this was probably the coolest thing, I think, from my research that I worked hard to get pretty accurate numbers on. And boy, did they tell a story. So I had always read in articles on Hoskins that he really had a dramatic effect on gate receipts. And it wasn't until I actually got out the calculator and dug up box scores that it really drove home with me. So I mentioned to you at the beginning, the average attendance in the Texas League post-war was about 2,000 a game. You can see that in my first column of numbers, right? It varied from city to city. Dallas wasn't bad, 2,500, right? San Antonio, 1,300 a game. But basically, we'll call it 2,000. The next column, this is the average attendance at that ballpark when Dave Hoskins was the starting pitcher, right? And if you look at that column of numbers and you say, oh my God, that looks double or triple or quadruple or, whatever the adjective would be for an even bigger number than that, it's true. I did the math. And that final column, I call the Dave Hoskins multiplier. This is the impact he had on attendance, not just for one game, right? Not just for, oh, he's going for his 20th win or something like that. This was the entire season. For an entire season, he tripled the attendance of the Texas League everywhere he pitched. That's unheard of. Nobody's ever done that in the Texas League, right? Maybe in some other leagues, I don't know. Even that's hard to believe. So just absolutely unbelievable. So I'm going to give you some comps. They're all going to sound like a stretch, but I think Dave Hoskins has the numbers to back all of this up in 1952. Here you go. Here are his comps. So perhaps for obvious reasons, he's the Jackie Robinson of the Texas League. And you could say, well, it was only the minor leagues, or, well, it was 5 years after Jackie, right? Well, guess what? He was doing it in the Jim Crow South, right? A lot of players that played in the South in the early 1950s, they said, that's great that Jackie did what he did. I don't know that it made my life any easier. Okay. How about my next comp? You might think I'm getting crazier and crazier as I go with this list. Shohei Ohtani. Well, why do I say that? Not because Dave Hoskins had a 50-50 season, but Dave Hoskins had the top two-way season in the history of the Texas League, right? So that's kind of Shohei Ohtani, Bullet Rogan, Babe Ruth, whatever you want to say there. Satchel Paige. Why do I say that? Dave Hoskins was the biggest draw in the history of the Texas League, tripling attendance, not just at home, but everywhere he went, right? Essentially the effect that Satchel Paige had when he would go places and pitch. Now, I want to give credit where due. If we ask ourselves, out of this tripled attendance, where were those numbers coming from? I'm going to tell you, that was largely the black public making up that difference. These were fan bases, these were dormant fan bases that didn't have a lot of reason to show up to the ballpark prior to 1952. When Dave Hoskins came to town, attendance would double or triple in these ballparks, and the bulk of that surplus, or the bulk of that difference, was coming from the black seating sections. So much so that there were ballparks that had to make their black seating sections much bigger to accommodate the integrated league. Now, these are three really awesome comps, but I'm going to show you another famous comp that isn't awesome in my opinion, and that is, like I mentioned before, despite being the Jackie, the Shohei, and the Satch of the Texas League in 1952, Dave Hoskins remains, even in SABR circles, a complete unknown, right? Sad, but true, right? I wish the history was more well known. I'm trying to do my part, as you can tell. So one of the things, I don't know if anybody here has any connections to the Texas Rangers, but, right, they've got time. So I say, why not? We are a little under 2 years away from the 75th anniversary of the integration of the Texas League, from the anniversary of Dave Hoskins' Dallas Eagles debut. So I'm picturing a bobblehead night. His grandson, also named Dave Hoskins, could throw out the first pitch. You might think I'm bluffing, but I asked him one time, would you be interested in throwing out the first pitch? He's like, sure. Okay. So anyways, presented by Nolan Ryan Beef, I don't know, but I saw that that's what they do with some of their bobbleheads. So if anybody's got connections, let's make it happen. I think this would be a tremendous way to sort of bring that history to life for a new generation of fans. Alrighty. With that, right, we've heard, despite the number of minutes I've spent and my excitement, we've seen only two teams in the league integrate, the Dallas Eagles and the Oklahoma City Indians. Well, 1953 marks the beginning of what I'm calling the Texas flood. And I feel really bad because I came up with this slide before the actual deadly flood that just happened. And I'm realizing now, oh God, I needed to get rid of that. So sorry for what I think now would be much less tasteful than it was June 20 something. Anyways, okay, let's start with Dallas. Dave Hoskins went straight to the Cleveland Indians. He jumped straight from AA to the majors, skipped AAA. That's how good he was in 1952, right? Jose Santiago stuck with the team. And then this was kind of interesting. Dick Burnett went and I'll say rated the Negro Leagues for two of their most fearsome sluggers, Buster Clarkson, who you're going to hear about later, and Willard Brown, who's a Hall of Famer, right? Literally, National Baseball Hall of Fame. You might wonder, right? Why the change? Why did he go from players he thought of as young prospects? Hoskins, it turns out, was 8 years older than Burnett realized, but players he thought of as young prospects to these aging Negro League sluggers. Well, one of the reasons is come 1953, Dallas was independent. They were no longer affiliated with the Indians. They no longer had the rest of the Indians farm system to tap into. So you'll actually see this as we talk about some other teams, that sort of where they looked for talent definitely varied quite a bit. But in the case of Dallas, once they were no longer affiliated with Cleveland, it was aging, seasoned sluggers with impressive track records more than young prospects. But anyways, you can't do much worse, or much better, I should say, than these two sluggers. All right, what about other teams though? Well, let's go to Tulsa. A name you might know if you're an Indiana basketball fan or a Cincinnati Reds fan is Chuck Harmon. Opening day 1953, Chuck Harmon integrated the Tulsa Oilers. Couple weeks later, Nino Escalera joined the team as well. Both these guys, the very next season, 1954, would integrate the Cincinnati Reds on the same day, April 17th, 1954. Harmon, by the way, total stud in the Texas League, stole a lot of bases, scored a lot of runs, got a lot of hits, hit for high average. Huge success with Tulsa in 1953. Escalera, not quite as much, but still pretty good. What about the very next day? Let's head to San Antonio. Alrighty. You see Charlie White here, backup catcher for the Braves in 1955. But in 1953, April 10th to be exact, integrated the San Antonio Missions at catcher. You see him as the gentleman on the right on the baseball card with two guys. On the left is Harry Wilson, who 3 days later took the mound and gave the Texas League its first all-black battery. These two guys, White, I'd say, had a pretty good year, better than average catcher in the Texas League. Wilson had an incredible debut. He actually pitched into extra innings, won the game, I think gave up only 2 runs, and scored the winning run himself with something like 2 hits and 2 runs in the game. So great debut. His finish for the season wasn't so strong if you looked up those numbers. All right, let's keep going though. So now we head to 1954, and you remember Buster Clarkson. I mentioned his name. He was with Dallas in 1953. I didn't apply any advanced sabermetrics, but if you look at the numbers, we'll say he was clearly the top offensive player in the league in 1953 with Dallas. Nonetheless, January 1954, he was traded to the all-white Beaumont Exporters. Starts the season with an absolute bang. His very first game, I think he has a home run, 5 RBIs, 3 or 4 hits, something like that. Just an absolute beast at the plate. By the way, he's a 39-year-old shortstop, right? Kind of a rare breed, 39-year-old shortstop, and the best offensive player in the league. Pretty crazy. He did so well with Beaumont that before June was up, Dick Burnett made the biggest trade in Texas League history to bring him back. Imagine making the biggest trade in the history of your league to bring back a 39-year-old shortstop. But that's how good Buster Clarkson was in 1953 and 1954. Now, Beaumont also added a player that some of you, if I have any Jackie Robinson scholars in the audience, might have heard of. His name's Jesse Williams, or I'll just say Negro League scholars, because he doesn't need the Jackie Robinson story to stand on his own. He was an all-star. But the point is, he was the shortstop for the Monarchs in 1945 until Jackie showed up, and then Jesse Williams moved to second base. Well, he played something like 6 games with Beaumont the Larry Doby of the Beaumont Exporters, if you like, right? So a little bit of a footnote. But part of the reason I bring this up is I'll say in doing this research, and I don't know if maybe Alan Cohen took a straighter path than I did in trying to dig around for largely some of the same, I guess, facts or pieces of data. But I will say that in some sources that were easier to find, Jesse Williams was credited with integrating the team, despite the fact that he joined the team about a month after Buster Clarkson. So I'll say that was a mini breakthrough in the research, or one of the harder things, I guess. Okay, so this is pretty incredible. Remember the biggest trade in Texas League history? This is Buster Clarkson putting on his Eagles uniform in 1954 for the first time, right? After being gone for half a season. Pretty fun. I just love everything about this video. And again, 39-year-old shortstop. Were one to watch the full video, you'd also see him taking some swings in the batting cage. I believe he wore number 14, kind of like Ernie Banks. All right, let's continue in 1954 mid-season. Well, Bob Boyd, if you look up his numbers in 1953 with the White Sox, he was a really good hitter. 1954, not so much. He ends up getting sent down to the Houston Buffaloes, right? Ends up integrating the team in June of 1954 and ends up, it's a partial season, but ends up one of the league's best hitters. Now, you might think, well, maybe he only had double-A talent at this point, but no, he went back to the majors the very next year and then had a 5-year run with the Baltimore Orioles where he batted over 400 over the course of 5 seasons. So his bat got healthy with the Houston Buffaloes. He integrated the team along the way. Now, if you're keeping score at home, I believe we have 6 integrated teams. And so there's only one more, but it would wait all the way until 1955. Somewhat ironically, I suppose, Maury Wills, who the Dodgers sent down to Fort Worth along with a second player named Eddie Moore, who showed up a couple days later and got into the lineup. Maury Wills, of all the names I've mentioned, had the worst Texas League season of any of the barrier breakers. He batted .203 and hardly stole any bases, right? It was kind of a disaster of a season, other than he integrated the team. Now, ironically, right, he had the worst season in the Texas League out of all these names, but by far the most successful major league career, right? We're talking about the 1962 National League Most Valuable Player, who, by the way, broke Ty Cobb's stolen base record that same season. One of my favorites, for sure. This gives me a chance. I don't think I told the Dallas audience, but it does give me a chance to tell you about Fort Worth with a little bit of nuance. We already know that the crowd raucously booed the MC at Dave Hoskins night, so maybe we saw this coming. But in fact, when Dick Burnett announced plans to integrate January 1952, the reaction from Fort Worth, I mentioned all the reactions were kind of around the same, like, okay, maybe we will someday. Fort Worth, though, kind of made a funny excuse. If you think about the Dodger system, right? They were a Dodger affiliate this whole time. Well, their president said, gee, it's too bad the Dodgers don't have any talented black players who could do well here in the Texas League. So kind of a funny statement if you think about all the players the Dodgers did have in their system. But anyways, Maury Wills. So that makes 7 out of 8. And you might wonder about that 8th team. Remember Shreveport? And they said, we will integrate over our dead bodies. Well, guess what? I didn't want to be that macabre, so I coined the term Texit. Let's take a look at what happened to Shreveport in 1957. And I don't even think we'll be very sad. So here's Shreveport. Obviously not one of the biggest cities in the Texas League. We know that. But doing great. Look at that. They're hitting that average attendance, 52, 53, 54. By the way, they won a few championships, or at least a couple in this range. They're pretty good. But guess what? 1956, the state passes a law. Ron Guidry fans, I didn't spell Louisiana Lightning wrong. This is Louisiana Lightning. I don't know how to pronounce it, but you get it. Different word. They outlawed integrated sporting events. So not only was it now illegal for Shreveport to integrate, not a problem, they weren't planning to anyways, but other teams couldn't even bring their black players to the games. So Willie McCovey by now was in the Texas League. Couldn't go to the games, right, if his team was playing Shreveport. The law actually took effect at the end of the 1956 season, So what I just said doesn't hold for the 56 season, it holds for the 57. But remember how I told you half the fans were black fans? Well, there they went, right? Take a look at 1957. Uh, Barely 500 fans a game. And how did this once great team do? They finished 43 games out of first place. 43 games out of first place. And things got so bad that they couldn't even stay in the league. They essentially got kicked out of the league. There was no professional baseball in Shreveport in 1958, none at all. In 1959, they joined the Southern Association, where there was little risk of integrating anytime soon. They were a little more comfortable there. But there we go. So that was the story of Shreveport in the Texas. So now we're ready to sum up. Texas League certainly got a late start. You can see the National and American League before Dave Hoskins took the mound for Dallas. But when the Texas League got going, it really got going, right? If we were to tally these up, here's the Texas League, 7 out of 8 teams integrated by early 1955. That puts them one ahead of the American League and tied with the National League. Kind of unbelievable, right? National American League's 5-year head start. The Texas League has caught up and even passed them in only their 4th year. Okay, as we know, of course, though, the National and American Leagues eventually finished integrating, whereas with the Texas League, Shreveport chose to disintegrate rather than integrate. With that, I just want to say my main purpose doing this work and sharing it with you is there are some names on this list that either you'd never heard of or you heard of them, but you didn't know that they were also Texas League barrier breakers. I'll also say that there was nowhere where you could find these names and dates all in one place. In fact, in some cases, you might not be able to find the date anywhere other than digging through old newspapers, which is what I did, what Alan did, and maybe some other folks. But this was some of this was easy to find, some of this was hard to find. I wanted to package it up for everybody. And then finally, just highlight some of these great players, right? Whether they did a lot or a little elsewhere. I would say they did a lot for Texas League baseball and baseball in general. So with that, right, researchers out there, if I can do it, you can. The players you see in red, Charlie White and Buster Clarkson, do not yet have SABR bios. Buster Clarkson has one of the most interesting lives and careers of anybody you're ever going to find. That is a huge one. Somebody needs to take that. Charlie White, not as exciting, but maybe it's easier then. I don't know. But guess what? Every single one of these debuts, every single one of these games that mark the integration of a Texas League franchise has no SABR game story. So there are 7 opportunities, sadly not 8, 7 opportunities for the researchers in the crowd. With that, right, I will say happy trails in the end, obviously, unless there's any questions. But share also, I'm a SABR member. I had some sources. Some of them might have been myself, but no. But anyways, these are some really good things. Lou Moore is on, so We Will Win the Day was one of the things that inspired me to dig a little deeper on this stuff. Bruce Adelson, Brushing Back Jim Crow. I think that book dates back to the 90s, but still, I think probably the best book on integration in the South. And there's a new book by 2 SABR members, The Integration of Minor League Baseball, that just came out. It's kind of part baseball encyclopedia, I would say. So anyways, there's some really cool stuff out there. With that, if anybody likes QR codes and you want a copy of the slides, you can do that, or you can just email me and I can hook you up. So Bruce, I don't know if I went so far over time that there's no time for questions, but do you want me to stop the share and we'll see?
I can. I'm going to do that for you now. You don't get
Right.
a time limit here in Northern New England, my guy, especially you, because
Too
I've
kind.
got. If you read the chat right now, Mark Hoyle, Jason always goes above and beyond with his presentations.
Aw.
Mary Shea, this was fabulous. Thank you, Michael Marsh. Thank you for the nice presentation. Mark Armour, tremendous work here, just awesome. You are Dan Mason. That was excellent. So
Aw.
when you told me in Dallas that you were giving us the deluxe version, you gave us the deluxe version. That was
Aw.
impressive. That was even more impressive than what I saw in Dallas, man. That was awesome. If you have a question tonight for the great Jason Schwartz, you know what to do. Go down to the bottom of the screen and hit the react button. You'll see another button marked raise hand. Raise your hand and we will get you in line to ask questions of Jason Schwartz. And who's up first? Go ahead and unmute. It's Molly McClure. Who's that? Who is that?
The good side of your trouble.
You say I don't know. I don't know, but go.
First of all, Jason, thank you so much.
You got it.
Second of all, I had a question about your attendance page with the multiplier thing. It showed the different stadiums. Now, when you made those numbers, did you like factor in how many times they visit and came up with averages?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So just to keep it simple, let's pretend Dave Hoskins pitched in Houston 4 times and the combined attendance for those 4 games was 20,000. Then I'd say, well, that was 5,000 fans per game, right? And if their typical attendance had been 1,000, I'd say, wow, he quintupled their attendance. That's a 5.1 multiplier. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay. It wasn't quite clear. I just wanted to say thank you so much again.
Oh, sure thing. No, I appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Next up from our sister chapter over in Vermont, the Gardner-Waterman chapter, let's go to Carl Lindholm. Dr. Lindholm, how are you? Let's let him unmute. Yeah. You got to hit the unmute button down there, Carl. There you go.
Just a fabulous presentation. I mean,
thanks, Carl.
Wonderful. I mean, the baseball cards that you had and the videos from the time. I mean, this is fabulous, deep research. The question I have is kind of as my understanding was that, and it's probably just entirely based on the Dodgers and the Montreal and the Trois-Rivières in 46 and 47 and Nashua, you know, the Dodgers integration. But my sense was that it was easier to be a hitter and a fielder than to be a pitcher. There's the story of Dan Bankhead that Buck O'Neill says he could have played in the majors, but he was afraid of starting a riot by hitting a batter. And so the surprise for me at the outset of your presentation was that Hoskins felt the reverse, that he would be safer pitching. And that to me is a revelation.
There were a couple things going on at the same time. And I know there are folks in the audience that could speak about this way more intelligently than me. But yeah, I mean, you make an excellent point, right? From his own personal safety perspective, it felt safer to be a pitcher because he's only out there maybe every 4 or 5 days. And they know if they hit him, he can hit their guy, perhaps, right? They might fear retaliation. But what's kind of interesting is there was still tremendous bias at that time, some could say still, related to Black pitchers and catchers. And as we saw, the first 3 players, the first 3 Black players in the Texas League were all pitchers, Greason, Santiago, and Hoskins. An early integrator was catcher Charlie White, right? So in some ways, Texas League integration really bucked the trend or bucked that bias. There was nothing I could find. You know, one of the things that's difficult about this sort of research is you piece together these little news stories that are like 2 little paragraphs long, right? There was sort of no real depth reporting I could find that really got into the nuance of it. But I would definitely say that it, in some sense, does seem to buck some trends in terms of some of the stereotypes and biases in terms of the positions, pitcher and catcher. But yeah, when Hoskins was talking about that it would be easier to pitch, he definitely wasn't saying I'd have a better shot moving up in white baseball as a pitcher. He was basically saying I may live, right? Because he was getting hit in the head a lot. I mean, it was dangerous business integrating the Central League as an outfielder.
Could I be permitted one quick comment and then I'll shut up, I promise.
Go.
I really appreciate, you know, your ambitious or comparisons to Ohtani, for example. Well, it always bothers me when national broadcasters say the only comp for Ohtani is Babe Ruth. And there are 3 Negro Leaguers in the Hall of Fame that were two-way players because the rosters were so small, Rogan, Day, and Dahigo.
Yeah.
So I was glad. I think that comp is more apt than you think. So I appreciate that.
I appreciate it. The one thing I'll say, despite being part of the Grays murderers row, is there's very little you'll see with Hoskins at any level where he's hitting a bunch of home runs. Like he literally seems like a very good singles hitter. And it may be that there's data out there that I just didn't come across, but of course, back then, right? I mean, a guy with a high batting average was considered one of the best hitters in the league, even if he didn't hit any home runs. Yeah, I appreciate it though, Carl. Thank you.
All right, next up, Troy. If I butcher your name, don't come get me. Olszewski?
Oh my God, you actually got it. Huh.
Oh, go get him, man. How you doing?
Sorry, my camera. I need to get a new camera. Damn thing won't work. So sorry about the
No
lack
worries,
of
man.
void. I've got a question. So, how did you get the attendance numbers? Was there were they readily available? Because I've done this kind of research before, and getting the attendance numbers is sometimes the hardest thing.
Yeah, so the good news, I mean, it is the Texas League, right? I mean, this was serious baseball in Texas. Very often, I don't want to say always, but very often, right? I didn't have superpowers as a researcher. So it's if Dave Hoskins pitched April 13th, I'd be like, let me see if he pitched again on the, 14th, 15th, 16th, right? I mean,
That's my thing.
I basically just
honestly.
looked every day. But, when I found that he pitched, most of the time in the box score, it would say attendance. It would say ATT, 5,743. Now, sometimes it would be like this really abbreviated box score and it wouldn't have the attendance. But the good news is, if I just looked at other Texas newspapers, I think Corpus Christi, for some reason, had the best Texas League box scores. I don't know why that would be because they didn't have a team then. But if I was persistent enough, I always was able to find a box score that would have the attendance. Now, sometimes in the narrative, it would give the black fan, white fan breakdown.
Wow.
But it didn't happen often enough for me to feel like I had reliable data. But there were articles. In fact, some of you, if you listen to Dodger games in the 70s on the radio, know the name Jerry Doggett. He was actually the PR guy for the Dallas Eagles in 1952. There's an interview with Jerry Doggett where he talks about something like half the fans at the Eagles game being black fans across the whole season, right? He talks about the number of fans that Dave Hoskins added just for Dallas games, basically how much money they made with these added fans. So sometimes you can get the breakdowns by seating section, but fortunately for every game I needed, there was always at least one newspaper that had it, but sometimes it was my second or third try.
Thank you. I'm surprised they segregated even the box score attendances. Wow. I wouldn't have thought of that. That's
Oh, so let me clarify. The box scores, I never did see black attendance, white attendance. What I would see is if there were a 5-paragraph article about the game, it would say something like, a record number of fans, 9,871 attended the game. 4,652 were black fans. They would use different terms at that time, you can imagine. But point is, sometimes it would be the accompanying article. The box score itself, not that I recall.
Next up, buckle up. It's Joe Ross. Joe, what's going on?
Quick question. Jason, great presentation. I loved it.
Appreciate it.
One question popped up when you had your slide. You were talking about box scores. The box score you put up at the bottom said the score was 2-0. But if you looked at the box score, there were 6 runs scored. So it was 6-0. Which was it?
Oh, okay. I think you're referring to Dave Hoskins' night. So it was 2-0.
Yes.
But if I'm thinking of the box score in my head, the alignment, they'd have the columns, runs, hits, assists, putouts, whatever, right? They always had kind of funny stats they wanted to report out. But there was a little bit of misalignment of the column headers. And so if you just sort of went down, it might look like there were, 4 runs for one of the teams, when in fact it was 4 hits.
No, it was at bats and then runs.
Yeah, it was definitely
hits.
Yeah, Dave Hoskins night was
obviously
definitely
the second column
2-0.
is runs.
Yeah.
the box, it was 6 runs.
Yeah, definitely 2-0. I can tell you that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, next up is Dan Sachalski. Dan, how you doing, man?
I am exhausted, but not from this.
I'm right there with you.
No, Jason, I love this so much in Dallas. I got off the road 4 hours ago, and I was not going to miss it anyway because I had to see it again. But I just wanted to say, like, there was a presentation sometime earlier this year where someone said it was the presentation of the year, or the front runner for the presentation of the year, and I just wanted to say that I think it's been surpassed.
You're too kind. I'm still voting for you. Plus bonus points for the Larry Doby, and I'm gonna joke and say, and my friend Chris Kampka, because that's his Twitter avatar right next to Doby. But I appreciate that, Dan. Thank you.
Andy Tarek in the chat, outstanding presentation as always. Victoria Lovingood, this was great, better than Dallas for sure. Love the extra depth. You're a Grand Slam home run tonight, man.
Hey.
I got one more hand up, and it is Dixie Tarango. Dixie, what's going on? How you doing?
I'm doing fine, and I'm going to agree with Mr. Ross. That box score, that's a huge typo in the box score. They had a guy with no hits scoring 4 runs. And whoever was adding things up saw the 4 runs, saw the 2 runs by the other guy, Creel, who did score them, and said 6. It's as simple as that. It's just a plain, simple, awful typo.
All right. Well, there you go. There you go. I just want to give 2 shout outs. I'm going to put them in the chat because we have 2 gentlemen that were here today in the audience and even a little bit in the chat. So I mentioned Wendell Smith. You saw maybe Michael in the chat added a little more commentary on that. But Michael is maybe the most knowledgeable person I've ever met on Wendell Smith. Wrote the preface to the Wendell Smith Reader. And then Lou Moore is here, professor, Michigan State University, go Sparty, wrote We Will Win the Day, which is just a tremendous look at the intersection of civil rights and sports. So I think I saw Dave Hoskins for the first time in Lou's book. So yeah, so those are my shout outs. And obviously, thank you to everybody for being here.
And we're thrilled to have Michael and Lou with us this evening. Thanks for coming out, guys. One more, Victoria Lovingood. You're up, Victoria. How are you?
I'm good. It's actually Scott who has the question.
Hey there.
Oh, that's not fair.
I don't know.
Jason, I'm doing great. Jason, when the Dodgers first integrated their minor leagues, they tried to protect players by sending them to Montreal and Nashua.
True.
In 52, was there a different mindset in major league front offices to just try and put them down south and see what will happen? Or was this just one man in Dallas trying to get more people in the seats?
No, so good question. So with the Dodgers, and that's my team, right? As you know, so I'll be embarrassed if I get this historical detail wrong, but I believe that was very much Branch Rickey's approach. But by 1952 or 1955, if we look at Fort Worth integrating, Branch Rickey had already moved on, right? So had it been that the Dodgers were the ones sort of unwilling to supply any players to Fort Worth, and the Fort Worth team said, gee, it's too bad the Dodgers won't let any of their guys play here, I would have probably viewed the remark differently. But the president of the Fort Worth Cats, I won't quote him verbatim because I don't have it in my head quite, but basically said it's too bad the Dodgers don't have any players good enough to play here. Any black players good enough. So that's why I give them kind of low marks and call them out in the presentation. But yeah, Branch Rickey definitely had that philosophy, especially early. But yeah, by the time all this was happening with Fort Worth, oh, shades of Al Campanis. Oh, yikes. Yeah, okay. Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Yeah, but it was no longer Branch Rickey. I think maybe Buzzy Babasi, if I'm remembering right. The fact checkers can weigh in on that. I researched one thing. Sorry, guys, that's all I know.
Carl's got his hand up. One more time for Carl Lindholm.
No, Babasi is a great hero. I'm a New Englander, Maine and Vermont, and I tolerate New Hampshire. But the fascinating story is Nashua. Nashua in 46, in 47 had
47.
both Campanella and Newcomb. And Newcomb the next year too. Manager was Walter Alston, you know this. But the real mover and shaker in that whole affair was the general manager Bavesi, Buzzy Bavesi, who was in his 20s and just back from World War II and very progressive minded. And he was I think really instrumental in the Dodgers' early success, especially as relates to the first integrated team in America, the Nashua Dodgers. Terrific story.
Yeah. No, Carl, thank you.
Good stuff.
Oh, a little Clyde Sukeforth connection.
Little Sukeforth connection. Clyde was in on that as well. Yep. Clyde was also one of the progressive thinkers with the Dodgers. I just had a couple of weeks ago the chance to speak to a couple of his grandkids who want to. They want to get together, and they have some artifacts for us and whatnot to donate. So I can't wait to get in touch with them. If only life would slow down a little bit, huh?
Mm.
But Jason, man, the deluxe presentation, you came through. Wow.
Appreciate it.
Oh, man. All right. Join us Monday, August 4th, when we host Larry DeFilippo, who's got a lot to live up to after this presentation, for his talk, Defying Convention, Left-Handed Double Play Combinations. The sign-up link is available in the chapter meeting booklet and in the SABR events calendar. And finally, if you're a baseball fan watching on YouTube and you like what you see, please like this video and subscribe to our channel to be alerted to our weekly uploads. And if you're not yet a member, you need to join the Society for American Baseball Research, the premier baseball community. Offering an amazing baseball buffet of options to explore your fandom, SABR boasts more than 35 different research committees, over 80 regional chapters, and innumerable opportunities to connect with baseball minds across the world, like Jason Schwartz. For more information, go to SABR.org today. My man, you're fantastic. Thank you.
Negro Leagues conference in a week.
Much. Say that again.
Negro Leagues conference in a week in Louisville.
That's right. Negro League conference in a week in Louisville. If that is also available in the events calendar, check that out. You can still sign up for it. All right. For Jason, let's get everybody out of here. Have a great week, guys. We'll see you next Monday.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.